very soon. Stay away from the bridges. Bridges are very dangerous places. I know this from past experience.
Chapter 54.
Chapter 54.
Bill Capistran was the man with a plan, and also a very bad and dangerous attitude. Serious anger management problems, to put it mildly. But soon he'd also be the man with $250 large in his bank account in the Caymans. All he had to do was his particular job, and what he had to do wasn't going to be that hard. I can do this. No problemo. Capistran was 29 years old, slim and sinewy, originally from Raleigh, North Carolina. He had played lacrosse for a year at North Carolina State, then left for the Marines. After a 3-year stint, he'd been recruited to do merc work for a company out of Washington. Then, 2 weeks ago, he'd been approached by a guy he knew from D.C., Jeffrey Schaefer, and he'd agreed to do the biggest job of his career, $250,000's worth. He was on the job now. At 7 in the morning, he drove a black Ford van east across 57th Street in Manhattan, then turned north at 1st Avenue. Finally, he parked near the 59th Street Bridge, also called the Queensboro. He and 2 men in white painter's overalls climbed out of the van, then gathered up equipment from the back. Not paint and drop cloths and aluminum ladders. Explosives. A combination of C4 and nitrate to be packed into the bridge's lowest trusses at a strategic point near the Manhattan side of the East River. Capistran knew the Queensboro inside and out by now. He stared up at the sturdy 95-year-old bridge, and what he saw was an open, flexible structure, a cantilever truss design, the only one of the 4 East River bridges that wasn't a suspension bridge, which meant that it required a special kind of bomb, one that he just happened to have in the back of the van. This is something else, Capistran couldn't help thinking as he and his compadres hauled their gear toward the bridge. New York City, the East Side, all these fancy-ass big business dicks, these blonde princesses walking around as though the world was theirs for the taking. Nerves aside, he was almost enjoying himself now, and he found himself whistling a song that struck him as pretty funny. The 59th Street Bridge Song, Feelin' Groovy, by Simon and Garfunkel, whom he considered to be typical New York City assholes, too. Both of them, Curly and the midget. For the past couple of days, Capistran had been working into the wee hours with a couple of sympathetic engineering students at Stony Brook University out on Long Island. One whiz kid was from Iran, the other from Afghanistan. They got a kick and a half out of the irony, too. New York-trained college students helping to blow up New York. Land of the fucking free, right? They called their team the Manhattan Project. Another insider joke. At first, they had considered an ANFO, a type of bomb that would blow a crater in a road for sure, but was unlikely to topple a large bridge, like the Queensboro. The college whizzes told Capistran that he could see what an ANFO would accomplish just by setting off a firecracker on a city street. Or imagining it. The explosion would be characterized by coward forces which always seek the path of least resistance. In other words, the bomb would make a nasty little burn on the road, but the real destructive power would escape up and sideways into the air. Not good enough for today. Too benign. Not even close to what was needed. Then the clever-as-hell college students came upon a much better way to blow up the bridge. They instructed Capistran on how and where to attach several small charges at different points in the foundation. This was similar to the way demolition companies toppled old buildings, and it would work like a charm. Since he had absolutely no interest in being caught, Capistran had considered sending divers into the East River to set the charges on the supports. He had approached the bridge several times himself, and to his surprise, he found security to be virtually non-existent. That's exactly the way it was early that morning. He and his two associates walked out on the lower supports of the 59th Street Bridge, and nobody said boo to them. From a distance, the ornate silver-painted ironwork and finials had made the old bridge look rather delicate. Up close, the real power of the structure was revealed. The massive trusses, rivets as large as a man's kneecaps. This sounded crazy, but it would work. His piece would work. Sometimes he wondered how he'd gotten so sour on everything, so bitter and full of rage. Hell, years ago in the Marines, he'd been part of the rescue team that had extracted downed pilots like Scott O'Grady in Bosnia. Well, he wasn't a war hero anymore. He was just another capitalist working in the system, right? And that was a lot truer statement than most people could let themselves believe. As he continued to walk out on the support structure, Capistran couldn't help humming, then singing the words to Curly and the Midget's 59th Street Bridge song.
Chapter 55.
Chapter 55. The strangest, most puzzling thing happened next. The deadline passed, and nothing happened. There was no message from the wolf, no immediate attacks, nothing. Silence. It was eerie, but also incredibly scary. The wolf was the only one who knew what was going on now. Or maybe the wolf, the president, and a few other world leaders. Rumor had it that the president, vice president, and the cabinet had already been moved out of Washington. This thing wouldn't stop, would it? The news stories certainly wouldn't. The Post, the New York Times, USA Today, CNN, the networks, they had all gotten hold of some version of the threats against major cities. No one knew which cities or who was doing the threatening, but after years of yellow and orange alerts from Homeland Security, no one seemed to take the threats and rumors too seriously. The uncertainty, the war of nerves, had to be part of the wolf's plan, too. I was in Washington for the Memorial Day weekend and was asleep when I got a call to get over to the Hoover building right away. I looked at the alarm clock, squinting to focus, saw that it was 3:15 in the morning. Now what? Have there been reprisals? If so, they weren't telling me over the phone. "I'll be right there," I said, pushing myself out of bed, cursing under my breath. I showered under hot, then cold water for a minute or two, toweled off, threw on clothes, and got in the car and drove through Washington in a horrible daze. All I knew was that the wolf was going to call in 30 minutes. 3:30 in the morning, after a long weekend, with the expired deadline hanging over our head. He wasn't just controlling, he was sadistic. When I arrived at the crisis room on 5, there were at least a dozen others already there. We greeted one another like old friends at somebody's wake. For the next couple of minutes, bleary-eyed agents kept filing into the conference room, nobody seeming completely awake. A ragged line formed at the coffee table as a couple of pots finally arrived. Everybody looked nervous and on edge. "No Danish?" said one of the other agents. "Oh, where's the love?" But nobody even smiled at his joke. Director Burns came in a few minutes past 3:30. He was wearing a dark suit and tie, formal for him, but especially at this time of the morning. I had the sense that he didn't have any idea what was happening either. The wolf was in charge, not any of us. "And you thought I was a tough boss," Director Burns cracked after a couple of minutes of silence in the room. Finally, there was a sprinkling of laughter. "Thank you for coming," Burns added. The wolf came on the line at 3:43. The filtered voice, the characteristic smugness and disdain.
You're probably wondering why I scheduled a meeting in the middle of the night. Because I can. How do you like that? Because I can. In case you haven't been able to tell, I don't like you people very much. Not at all, actually. I have my reasons, good ones. I hate everything America stands for. So maybe this is partly about revenge. Maybe you've wronged me somewhere, sometime in the past. Maybe you've wronged my family. That's a part of the puzzle. Revenge is a sweet bonus for me. But let me get to the present. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I instructed you not to conduct any more investigations into my whereabouts. So, what do? You bust 6 poor bastards in downtown Manhattan because you suspect they're working with me. Why, one poor girl was so distraught that she went out a 3rd-floor window. I saw her fall. I suppose that you're thinking, such as it is, was that of my operatives there, then New York City would be safe. Oh, I'm sorry. I almost forgot. There's also a little matter of a deadline you missed. Did you think I had forgotten about that? Well, I didn't forget about the deadline, or the insult in your missing it. Now, watch what I can do.
Chapter 56.
Chapter 56.
At 3:40 in the morning, following instructions, the Weasel took up a position on a bench in the riverfront park on Sutton Place and 57th Street. There was a great deal that bothered him about this job, but the problems were balanced by 2 large positives. He was being paid a lot of money, and he was in the middle of the action again. Jesus, am I ever in the middle of the shit. He stared down on the East River's dark, swift-moving currents. A red tugboat marked McAllister Brothers was assisting a container ship on its way. The city that never sleeps, right? Hell, the bars on 1st and 2nd Avenues were just getting down to their last call. A little earlier, he'd passed an animal medical center that was still open for late-night pet emergencies. Pet emergencies? Jesus, what a city, what a messed-up country America had become. A lot of New Yorkers would be wide awake soon, and they would find it exceedingly difficult to get back to sleep. There would be weeping and the gnashing of teeth. The wolf was going to make certain of that in a minute or so. Schaefer watched the seconds on his watch tick down to 3:43, but he was also keeping an eye on the river and the Queensboro Bridge. Cars and cabs and quite a few trucks were whizzing up along there, even at this hour. Easily 100 vehicles were crossing the bridge right now, probably more than that. The poor wankers. At 3:43, Schaefer pressed a button on his cell phone. This transmitted a simple coded squirt to a small antenna on the Manhattan side of the bridge. A circuit began to close, a primer fired. Microseconds later, a message straight from hell was delivered to the people of New York City and the rest of the world. A symbolic message. Another wake-up call. A massive explosion ripped through the girders and trusses of the 59th Street Bridge. Joints were severed instantly, shockingly, terminally. The old steel structures snapped like peanut brittle. Huge rivets popped out and plummeted toward the East River. Tarmac crumbled. Reinforced concrete fractured like paper being shredded. The upper roadbed cracked in two. Then enormous sections dropped like bombs onto the lower deck, which was breaking up as well, peeling away, twisting and twirling toward the water below. Cars were falling into the water. A delivery truck carrying a full load of newspapers from a plant in Queens rolled backward down the inverted roadway and then pirouetted into the East River. It was followed by more cars and trucks, dropping like lead weights. Electric lines drooped and sparked along the entire length of the bridge. More cars, dozens of them, plummeted from the bridge, fell into the river, then disappeared beneath the surface. Some people were exiting their cars, then jumping to their death in the river. Schaefer could hear their terrifying screams